Welcome to Napa Valley Inside Out. I'm Latif Hasan, and I am delighted to be hosting this podcast, shining a light on one of the most beautiful and coveted lifestyles in the world. If you're interested in developing a property, planting a vegetable garden, making olive oil, fashion, architecture, interior design, county rules and regulations, biking paths, art, getting into the wine business, farming practices, the tax benefits of owning a vineyard, or the ultimate private tours and tastings, and all the fabulous annual cultural events we enjoy here, and so much more, then you won't want to miss this show. Every week I will be interviewing amazing talent, vintners, entrepreneurs, leaders, consultants, festival organizers, and well-known personalities in the Valley. They will share their knowledge, experience, advice, goals, passions, and their best-kept secrets. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to introduce you to somebody I have great admiration for. Clint St is with us today. Clint has served as a Marine in Iraq. He was a volunteer firefighter in the October Wildfires. He's training to become a paramedic and to get his helicopter pilot license. And he's going to share some of his experiences with us today. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
You have so many amazing stories. I'm excited about this interview.
Yeah, a couple.
You thrive on being a first responder. It's extraordinary. Since I've known you, I've observed and listening to your stories. You have figured out that is really your calling in life, I would say.
Yeah, there's that. I take a lot of pleasure, joy out of doing that. But I think that also there's people that are like me, just are a little bit adrenaline junkies. Yeah?
I guess you'd have to be to do what you've done. Yeah. So you became a Marine out of school, and tell us about your jaunt in Iraq. How did that all come about?
Iraq. So Iraq was 2008, 2009, and so let's see. I was 24. I was a platoon sergeant. We ran a transport unit. We went over and attached to a larger company as a transport unit, and so we had 40 Marines. And when we got there, we parted out to the different platoons, and we occupied or covered about 3/4 of the country over almost a year in country. So we got a really great view. We got quite the tour of that country, and there were a lot of things that happened. But I'd have to say, out of it was very rewarding. There were a lot of good things that came out of that trip.
And what were some of the accomplishments that the platoon was trying to achieve that you were heading up? You had the 40 guys under you, right?
Correct.
And you're a young 24-year-old or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing. Yeah.
So some of the things that we did, we worked real close with the Iraqi army. We were training them on tactics and procedures and how to conduct patrols and vehicle checkpoints and basically how to make their area safer. We worked on smuggling interdictions. There was drug trades, cigarettes and alcohol are also another trade. We worked to secure northern Iraq during the provincial elections, 2008. So that was a great experience to get up there and be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Overall, the humanitarian aid that we provided to people, I think, was what was the greatest reward for most of the guys. Going out and visiting with towns and providing people with fresh water, clean water, helping them repair their wells, setting up health clinics, bringing in generators, because during the earlier years of the war, all of the power lines had been pulled down and stripped of the copper for being traded in for money. Mm-hmm. So the infrastructure had been gutted. So we really had to do what we could to improvise and bring the best provisions that we could for the people. So that meant warm blankets in the wintertime, rice, clean water, like I said, and healthcare to the rural parts of the villages, just to do welfare checks on the people. And it also gave us an opportunity to build some rapport with people on the outskirts where there may have been people that meant ill will towards us or certain people in the country.
Right.
So it was that was the rewarding piece of that.
But it was a huge responsibility for a 24-year-old to have 40 people working under him, and the responsibility of those 40 people in extraordinary circumstances. Right. And I remember having lunch with you one day, and you said, after coming back from Iraq, there is nothing that we couldn't do, because you were never really fully prepared for anything that you had to do in Iraq, and no matter how much training, right? And I remember you telling me, when I came back, I thought everything's so easy because of the experiences that you'd had.
Right. So everybody that gets ready to ship out, they go through some intensive training. We were no exception. It was over a year's worth of training, specifically for what we were going to do. We came from reserve unit too, so my guys came from all walks of life. We had people that were firefighters, cops, nurses. I had an attorney. We had guys that worked as mechanics organically, and now they were overseas working as mechanics. They were huge to be an asset for us, and to work on the different vehicles that the Iraqi Army and police had that they needed assistance with. So we also brought in about half our platoon were organically from communications platoon. So we trained them as operators and drivers and how to do tactical driving. And that's a critical asset. Your communication is key when you're, in life, communications is key, right?
Right.
Especially when you're in a situation like that. So we had to have radios that were operational. And when they go down, if you don't know how to use the equipment, it's very difficult to get it back up.
Yeah.
So we had a diverse group of guys. And yes, when we got there, you feel like you're prepared to an extent. You cannot prepare for everything. And anybody that tells you for the first time going over that they felt like they were prepared and they weren't scared is fibbing.
Yeah,
because I think all the guys were nervous. They were all, there were guys that were terrified,
right,
and others that seemed to just kind of blank over and want to sheet it out. But we actually came back without a single life loss. We had some injuries, but other than that, from our platoon, we didn't lose anybody. Now, just outside of our platoon, within the company and outside the gate, we lost some guys, but I was really, really happy to be able to have all of our guys come back.
Oh, I'm sure. And what an incredible life experience for you that will stay with you forever, and the discipline, and to come back knowing that there's nothing I can't do. It's like the world is my oyster, really. I think that's how you really felt.
Yeah, it is. When you come back from that kind of an experience, it puts the rest of the world in a different perspective.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So the great challenges that once seemed so large don't see so far to reach anymore.
Right.
So it makes you rise to the occasion.
And when you came back, you got your contractor's license. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. Started working in construction, and then you and I met after the fires. Because so you were a volunteer firefighter during the October fires, which we'll get to in a minute, and you and I met at a wonderful party that I was very fortunate to co-host for all of the first responders that we were trying to raise funds and to celebrate you that had lost their homes. There was 40 of you, right, that had gone out to fight for our homes, our businesses, but you had all lost your homes, and you were one of them. You had lost your home, and you went on to fight for the rest of us. And so that was a really special party, and having those guys that fought for us at the party, and all the vintners, the owners turn up, so many amazing wineries that came to pour, all the owners, and great entertainment. It was really a very, very memorable party. It was fantastic. Everybody showed up to celebrate you and thank you. So the sad part about that is you were making a living out of being a contractor, which you're still doing at the moment while you're training to become a paramedic, but you lost not only your home, but you lost all of your tools. And then, like most people, you weren't adequately insured. And the insurance company that you were with, hopefully not with anymore, really did not do the right thing by you and everybody else, really. Everybody was still struggling, because I remember when I asked you, how are all your colleagues doing? And you said everybody's just barely trying to still figure things out. Here we are 6 months or so later and still trying to pick up the pieces of their lives. Some of the insurance companies have a lot to ask for, and some of them were just fantastic. So tell us about your experience. I know that night you saved your tenant. Tell us about the experience that night, because you were right in the thick of it in Calistoga, right?
Yeah, I'd have to back up to 2013. When I got out of the Marines, this came up as an opportunity to become a volunteer firefighter. I'd never thought about being a first responder or a firefighter before that period. It was just a prime opportunity. It presented itself, and I fell in love with it. Really took to it. I wanted to do as much as I could in my community. Be the EMT, go to engineer training, take officer courses, etc. Through that, I got some great experience, and I was able to go on several different strike teams and work as an EMT during the Valley Fire a couple of years ago, and really help people, and that brings me a lot of joy. When this one kicked off, the Tubbs fire happened, I was on the other side of the 101, and I was having dinner, and I remember getting a call from one of the firefighters, and he sounded distressed, and he asked me if I was coming in, if I could drive, and the tone of his voice told me I needed to go, and I needed to get there. So I said I'll be there in about 20 minutes. This was late. This was probably 9:40, close to 10 o'clock. So about 25 minutes later, I'd made it across town to Calistoga, and I'd taken the motorcycle that night. So that gave me a really unique personal experience coming over, going from cool, calm air on the west end of the county to going through Mark West Springs and up into the higher elevations, where suddenly it got not just warm, it got hot. I had hot winds coming in, and they were blowing at, apparently there were gusts up to almost 70 miles an hour. So on a motorcycle, everything is definitely exaggerated.
Yeah, magnified, yeah.
And magnified. And so I feel, I felt myself having to lean in sideways to maintain a straight direction of travel.
Oh.
So there were things coming out of the woods there and the trees, and they were blowing across the way. So it was a very unusual night from right out the gate. And when I got to the firehouse, two of the trucks were already gone. The chief, the assistant chief was there, and they said, we need to get you on the truck right now. We have to go. So I got gear on, and we drove down to Calistoga near Tubbs off of Franz Valley School Road.
Oh,
and as we made our way up that road, you could see the glow in the distance. And as we closed in on it, that's when I started filming on a cell phone camera, and I captured that moment as we came around the corner. And it was unreal, surreal to actually be in the thick of it with the winds howling the way they were. It was forcing fire, and it seemed like in every direction. But the scariest thing was when it started to climb up above us, and I was watching it climb to the tops of the trees and starting to come over the top of us. It also drew my attention to the power line that was directly above our vehicle that we hadn't seen yet, because we were all so focused on the chaos around us and the homes that were getting swallowed up by the second. So we took a quick assessment of basically everything that was lost in this area, and the chief made the decision we needed to start down the hill, team up with some of the other assets, and start an evacuation process through the canyon. And we got to about halfway back towards my house,
which is
on Mark West Springs, back towards Santa Rosa.
Right.
And there's a place there, Triple S Ranch.
Oh, yeah.
We got to Triple S Ranch, and I remember turning around and looking at Triple S, and there was a wall of fire behind this building. And I had to take a picture of that because it was so surreal. And I thought to myself briefly, these may be the last photos I ever take. It was terrifying. As the fire came down, the assistant chief got out of our vehicle, and said, I need to get to my house. I have tools and equipment. and I can do more from there. And he ran on foot in his gear down the hill to his house.
Which was where?
Which was below Triple S. I'd say
Mountain Home Ranch
about a
Road.
mile away off Mountain Home Ranch
Yeah,
Road.
Mountain Home Ranch Road, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And he got in his skid steer, and he had, I think, his brother or somebody, a neighbor, get in a water truck, and he spent the next 3 days cutting lines around his neighborhood to defend against the fire.
Unbelievable.
He was definitely a critical component to saving that neighborhood, and it's just amazing. I didn't learn about all this until obviously several days later, because at that point the chief and I loaded back up in the vehicle, got on the PA, and we were hitting the sirens and the horns and trying to notify everybody, because it's after about 11 o'clock at this point. It's late Sunday night, everybody's gone to bed for work the next morning. Some people may have been drinking or taking something to help them sleep, and that was our biggest concern, is that people weren't going to hear us or see us. And we had to go house to house through gates and knock on doors individually to get people and make sure that they were up, and then ask them to go and hit the next house, or ask them if they had any neighbors with special concerns, through the area. Release the horses, those kinds of things, because it really concerned me about all the animals out there.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I'm also quite an animal lover myself. So
yeah.
Hours went by. It seemed like we did that, and we drove as far as we could back towards Santa Rosa before the battalion chief from CAL FIRE that we were working with called a full halt. And apparently he'd run into a wall of fire, so he couldn't push any further. And we had all of our trucks that was on the strike team that needed to turn around and get out of there. That was a harrowing moment. And the truck behind me was from CAL FIRE. They had sucked in an ember into their air intake, and it got caught into the filter, and the filter began to burn, and smoke was billowing from the engine, and you could hear it go down and melt the intake tube into the turbo, and the truck began to wind down to a scream. And being a transport Marine, I was trying to get the filter open and get the thing out. It was the worst smell you could possibly imagine. Imagine burning fibers and plastic and rubber and everything else, and oils, and we were just trying to stop the fire so we could save the truck. But at that point, the truck was almost a complete loss. So we all loaded back up. We had to get out of there because the fire was burning hot right behind us. Our second engine, our Type 1, which is our big engine, was unable to turn around there. So the smoke was coming in so thick, he was having a real difficult time seeing. I got up next to him. I pulled up next to him so that our windows were next to each other so he could hear me. And I tried to illuminate the reflectors in the middle of the road that were behind him so he could use that as a guide to back up the truck, because it was so difficult to see through the smoke.
Yeah.
He told me a couple of days later that may have saved he and the other firefighters' life, because they could not see. There was fire in front of him, smoke behind him. It was just a really intense night, for all of us. And I remember now, as we're coming back, we were leapfrogging, trying to get to every home, make sure that we got everybody. And my house was in that path, so I looked down the driveway and I saw that my tenant's car was still parked in the carport. So I got out and I ran down, pounded on the door, and she came half asleep to the door asking
She
me
was
what's going
asleep.
on. And she was still asleep.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought, you couldn't hear me yelling. You didn't hear me on the PA. You didn't hear the sirens. You haven't heard the horn. Well, I'm glad you're here now. Let's go, right? So I told her to grab her cell phone, her keys, and her wallet, and just her PJs, what she had on. She had no time for anything else. The fire was on the back side of the house coming through the canyon. And she got her stuff together quickly. And as she was rounding that up, I took about 30, maybe 40 seconds to run into my house, grab a backpack and some essentials. I grabbed the computer, I grabbed a change of clothes, a little DOP kit, and a picture of my daughter and I at our first baseball game. It was by the front door. And that was it.
That was it. You lost everything.
That was it. Everything else, you had to just write it off. Fortunately, we got out to the garage. I was able to keep the truck because that was the only way that my tenant was going to be able to get out. She had a small little Honda. It was an older model, and it wasn't going to clear the rocks and the debris and the sticks and branches that had been falling through this whole storm. So she was able to get in my truck, and I told her just to drive back towards Calistoga until she sees another fire truck and ask them where to go, because they'd have the latest information on what was happening that way. And I didn't talk to her for another 3 days, or hear from her for another 3 days, because our cell phones were out, the towers were down, the radios were down, the internet was down.
Everything.
Since the power was gone, there was no running water in any of these places. So it was kind of like being in the apocalypse.
Oh my God, yes, it was. And I have no idea. You guys put your lives on the line, and you got so many people out that were asleep. I mean, I even had a client who took a sleeping tablet, and finally you guys came along and said, get out of here, and she evacuated to my house. And she went back the next morning and watched it burn to the ground, but she'd taken a sleeping tablet. Oh. So we could talk about this all night. In fact, all day, all night. There's lots of stories here. But so I wanted to move on to you. What are the Cubs that the Devil Pups youth? You are a Head Liaison Representative. Give us just a summary of that. We've just got a few minutes left, but give us a summary of how you volunteer, giving back in that capacity.
Sure. So the Devil Pups, just a brief little history, because when I say that, some people look at me funny.
Yeah.
Devil what? So Devil Pups is a program for youth that was created in 1954 by a couple of Marine Corps officers that witnessed a flag burning at a high school, and they thought, what would it do for these kids if they were to spend a week with some Marines and learn what it really meant to be an American, contributing American society as a citizen, and understand what that means to some people. So they got together. They got the blessing to start a youth program for ages 14 to 17 aboard Camp Pendleton, and active duty Marines would volunteer their time and help run. Essentially, it's a leadership camp that's run boot camp style, and I did it when I was 17. It changed my life. I've been volunteering with the program since 2003, every year except for when I was in Iraq. And in 2010, I took over as the liaison rep for Sonoma County and Northern Marin. Since then, it's grown from a smaller little presence here in Northern California to we've networked with the Lions Club, the Kiwanis, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, the Sons of Italy, the Marine Corps League. I mean, I could go on and name all the organizations. And these organizations have all gotten behind us. They help sponsor us because this program costs nothing for the kids to go. And it's, like I said, 10 days. This is transportation, room, board, training, all of it. No cost to government, fully funded by this nonprofit organization.
Unbelievable.
And I love it. I just absolutely love it. These kids are dedicated. They come out every Sunday. They run 3.5 miles. They do calisthenics. They do close order drill. We have a subject matter expert talk on some discipline that they're versed in. We've had every branch of the military represented out there. And so I just want to get the opportunity to present the information and let the kids make their own decisions in life.
And you've had some great successes with it. These kids have just come out for the better. Yes, yeah.
Last year we had a young lady that would be the first one in her family to join the military. And her parents told her and said at the graduation that we held up here, her mother got on stage and said, I told her not to do it, that she would embarrass the family. And then in tears, her mom said, I couldn't be more proud of her.
Oh. So fantastic, so fantastic. Tell us about your trip to China last year. I hear you had an interesting trip in China.
Yes. So last year, I had the unique experience and opportunity to go to China with Odessa Gunn and Mark Ching of the. He has the Animal Hope and Wellness Center in Southern California, and has opened up a satellite facility outside of Changsha, China. So we met up with him and some of his crew, and we went to tour their facility and see what they had going on. And they've been doing dog rescues now in China to save dogs from the Yulin Dog Meat Festival. This is a festival where they will take dogs, whether they're strays or pets or any animals that they find. They will drug them, they will beat them, they will drag them by neck, throw them in crab-sized cages, and take them to holding cells. And I've seen some of the most atrocious things you could possibly imagine. Banging them over the head, dropping them in pots of water, beating them, stabbing them, just out of, it seems like, pleasure. But the bottom line of all of this was, the explanation is that the torture makes the meat taste better. It brings out the adrenaline, and it makes the meat, gives it magical properties, increases male sex drive. Just unbelievable misinformation over there. And this has been going on now for decades. And it's really a tough thing to stomach. So we got there, and we went to one of these meat markets where they sell the dogs, just like you would pick up almost any other kind of meat, except they're live, they're behind cages, they're sitting there just waiting to be pulled out and hacked. So we went in, and we tried to purchase some of them, and there was one that was a young shepherd. He seemed to be smiling. He was wagging his tail. He was still full of life and joy, and he hadn't seen the atrocities yet that were to come. So we had to rescue him. So we tried to purchase him. We couldn't find the vendor, and in conversation, figuring out how we were gonna help save some of these dogs. I don't know what came over me, but I jumped over the counter. I got behind it. Lifted up the cage. I reached in, and we pulled this little guy out. I handed him over to Odessa, and Mark looked at us and said, "It's time to go." And we made our way out of the market quickly, with haste, got in the vehicle, and drove back to the facility. And this dog, all dogs that are rescued like this need to come back. They go through 3 months of quarantine. They get their papers filed, and then they are set to come back to America. And we flew him back 3 months later, and he now lives happily on a farm in Petaluma.
Oh, that's an incredible story. So how many were you able to save when you're over there, or buy?
I couldn't count, honestly.
But there was a lot.
Thousands. Mark's done thousands. We were able to bring back, between the two of us, Odessa and I, we were able to bring back 10.
Wow.
This is a lifelong passion. This is what she does, actually, for her, is her lifelong passion is what she does. So we brought back 10. They went to a local rescue facility here. Compassion Without Borders is the facility here in Santa Rosa. And it was such an incredible and rewarding feeling.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, everything you do is incredible and rewarding. So I think one of the fun things coming up for you is your helicopter pilot license. So how's that going?
Continuing education and training in helicopter training. It's challenging. It's very technical, but it's been a lifelong dream since I was a kid, and so I'm pursuing that as just a passion.
That's so not working with as a paramedic.
So I got a chance to fly with the California Highway Patrol, and the gentleman that I worked with, he's a little bit of my hero. These guys flew the night of the fires in 70-mile-an-hour winds in a helicopter and saved over 26 people and 2 dogs that they pulled out of areas that were getting engulfed in flames. Yeah. And I asked him about what it was like, and if my chances of getting in as a pilot were good, and he says, your chances of getting in are better as a paramedic. And so I shifted my full-time attention from finishing the pilot's license as a profession to more of a hobby, and started really working hard on finishing my paramedic certification, so that I could work in that capacity. You really are a first responder junkie. I love it. It's fantastic. I mean, how blessed are we to have you? Yeah. Thank you.
So you have to go over to where are you doing your training for paramedics?
So the paramedic training, a good friend of mine, he's a firefighter out of Bolinas, and he and I enrolled in the Paramedics Academy out in North Carolina. A great program they have out there. We do our hands-on training and our labs and skills out in North Carolina. And then we do a tremendous amount of work, homework, essays, quizzes, testing online here. So the majority of the course load is online, but it's intense, and it is a good solid 40 hours a week. It's a full-time job just studying. So it's consuming my life at the moment, but I cannot wait for it to be done and get a chance to work out in the field with some people that are, again, some people I really admire. A good friend of mine was a medic in the Army. He's done international missions for the last couple of years now, working in the Middle East, Africa, South America, the Dominican Republic. He was just there a couple of weeks ago, and he works as an international medic, and I admire that so much, and I'd love to join him.
Oh, so that's the next thing on your list. I love it. Oh my goodness, it's been so great having you on the show. Thank you very, very much for joining us, and thank you so much for everything you do for us and our country, our community. It's just amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you next week.